Hi, and welcome to Be Well with Miss Tonia. Today I would like to speak with you all about pros and cons. When you have to make a choice between two or more options and you want to examine their advantages and disadvantages, pros and cons are very important in helping to make a wise choice. Let's look at an example. My alarm goes off at 6 a.m. on a work day. I feel tired and I want to stay in the bed. I say to myself, it would feel so good to just stay in this bed and just sleep. Then I say, if I stay in the bed, I will be late for work and then my boss will be really angry with me. After weighing the pros and the cons, I decide to get up and go to work. Let's look at another example. A friend keeps me waiting at a restaurant and shows up 1 hour late. I begin to review in my mind the pros for leaving and standing him up and the pros for yelling at him when he arrives. I rehearse in my mind the things that I will say to him when he arrives for this late appointment with me. And I say I would never meet him in a restaurant again to myself. I then remember he is a good friend, and if I refuse to eat with him again, it would be a big loss for me. I review the pros of tolerating the distress of him being an hour late and me waiting for him for so long, and not yelling at him, even if he is late without much reason. Pros and cons can help you resist urges to act impulsively or do things that are destructive. Pros and cons can help resist urges to quit and give up on life. It can help one resist using drugs and having an angry outburst at others. Let's look at another example. Many people react to uncontrollable stress and crises by doing things that in the short or long run are damaging to their self-interest and well-being. These might be things such as throwing tantrums or saying things when they're angry that you will only regret later. Another example. When you are in the middle of a very important task at work and you might be tempted by being interrupted to deal with problems in your personal life, like a friend calling you to say that she's angry with you. It might be more effective for you to tolerate the distress of knowing that your friend is upset without solving the issue right away, and instead keep working on your urgent task at work. You will resolve the problem with your friend later. The goal for us all is to accept reality and tolerate distress. This leads to better outcomes. We all use or should use pros, or the advantages, and cons, the disadvantages, of a situation. We should do this many times during the day. How to do pros and cons. Let's look at that for a moment. Doing pros and cons involves writing down the positive and negative consequences of tolerating distress by resisting impulsive behaviors and the positive and negative consequences of not tolerating the distress by engaging in impulsive behaviors. Number 1, describe the crisis behavior. Describe the crisis behavior that you're trying to stop. A crisis behavior is any behavior that in the short run or long run is damaging to your self-interest and well-being. Number 2, examine the advantages and disadvantages of the behavior. Examine the pros and cons of the crisis behavior. What will happen if you act on your crisis urges? Consider both short-term and long-term consequences. For example, relief and feeling better immediately, the pros, may be short-term consequences of drinking excessively, using drugs, or yelling at someone. But having a hangover that interferes with work or ruining a relationship due to yelling and anger, the cons, may be the long-term consequences of the same behavior. Number 4, consider pros and cons for each different crisis urge. For example, if you are deciding to use illegal drugs, quitting a job, quitting school, It is important to consider the pros and cons of each action separately. Write a separate list for the pros and cons of not using drugs, quitting a job, or quitting school. And number 5, rehearse the pros and cons multiple times. Rehearse the pros of resisting urges and cons of giving in to the urges multiple times before overwhelming urges hit. These rehearsals make it more likely that the pros of avoiding destructive behavior and the cons of engaging in destructive behavior will pop up in your mind when needed. Think about the long-term benefits of avoiding destructive behavior to become stronger and thinking about immediate benefits of destructive behavior to become weaker. Number 6, review earlier pros and cons when a crisis urge strikes. Review the pros and cons you have written earlier when an overwhelming emotion or urge hits. If you have not written any down, this is the time to write up the pros and the cons of that situation. Here's a chart of how to do the pros and cons. So in my left-hand corner here to my left, you have a column that says the crisis urges. What happens if I act on that crisis? What are the advantages of acting on that crisis urge, and what are the cons or the disadvantages for acting on that crisis urge? And then we have resisting the crisis urge. So if I resist yelling at an individual or throwing a tantrum, what are some of the advantages for doing that? And what are some of the disadvantages for doing that? Just like the young lady who was waiting for the friend in the restaurant. She wanted to yell at him, she wanted to leave and say she would never be his friend again. And then she spoke on the advantages. It would make her feel better, but some of the disadvantages would have been she would have lost a long-term friend. And she agreed that that would have been a great loss to her. For more information, please check out our website, www.dcsirish.com. Follow us on Instagram, Dublin City Schools Irish, or go to our YouTube channel, Be Well with Miss Tonia. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to be well.